Hi, Alissa.
How are you, Sandra?
Good. Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
And oh, Erica's here. Yay. Hi, Erica. um, yeah, so welcome. And yeah, I guess you're in a similar kind of climate as here, just a
Yeah,
typical kind of gray and blah today.
yeah. We had a little hint of spring like last, but now not
There are
anymore.
little green things
Yeah.
starting to, yeah. So there's hope. Anyway, so let's jump right into this topic of composers from the classical era who happen to be women. Um, so let's just start with the normal question I ask everyone. It's like, where are you from? And tell us about your background, your training, etc.
Yeah. So I currently live in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I've been here for like 6 years, I think. And I grew up in Utah, though my family is all in Utah. So I love like the outdoors and hiking and that kind of thing, just being from Utah, of course. But as far as my training background, I I have degrees in piano performance and piano pedagogy. So I've mostly been in those areas specifically. And so and I am currently finishing up my doctoral degree. So I'm just wrapping up the dissertation stuff and finishing all of that this year.
Awesome. That must feel hectic slash light the tunnel.
Yeah, it's a busy time. We have like I'm getting married next month, so that's great. That's like a big thing too, but it's a lot of exciting things going on for sure.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
It would be Mrs. Doctor,
Yes, Mrs. Doctor. That's right.
whatever. Ms. to you. So just to start from the is again a question I often ask. Like many of us who are focused on this area of researching and performing and promoting music by women. Well, I anyway have come to this fairly recently, like in 2019, I'd say was my wake up moment, where I realized I had been buying this story that women composers weren't really a thing, or if they were, they didn't really write that well. So, how about you? Like, when did your conviction regarding this oversight in the musical world come about?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I think for me it was mainly kind of around the same time as you actually, interestingly. Like maybe just a little earlier with some composers. I did some research on Clara Schumann like 2017, 18, somewhere in there. And so that was a little bit of like a door into that. But it definitely, I think there were so many things that came together for me that were like related to my personal life, related to like me learning more politically, engaging more politically in the world. And then like all these religious questions, like all of these things. And then also I was connected with some really great musicology professors who really got me thinking about the canon and thinking about the way that it's been created, and that's it's a social construction, that the canon that we have, in of course. And so to actually examine that and question it and think critically about it, which is not something I'd ever considered doing at all. And it was actually, that's quite frowned upon in many institutions, to question the canon, to question the masterpieces and the greats. And I had a professor recently who was asking me about the work that I'm doing, and asking, maybe attacking is a better word, but just who was saying things asking me basically, I think his words were, do I actually believe that anything a woman wrote could replace something that a man wrote? And that was so shocking to hear that from someone who was, in this position of power, who was instructing future leaders and future pianists, to say something that is so frankly misogynist, and really that puts women down into a place where they can't be heard. And so so I think it's been this kind of gradual evolution for me. Like I said, just a lot of things coming together, and realizing how far we have to go has been something I feel like I'm honestly constantly learning just how far. And I kind of get these glimmers of hope, and then it's just that, there's always ups and downs with it. So, yeah.
I resonate with how you're describing that. And I love how you say, you're just finally feeling like you needed to examine and question. And there's really there's no support for that, really. Like there has. So yeah, that's exactly it. And I so resonate with that. So like, what was your first sort of experience with, like, okay, Clara Schumann, and then where did you go from there?
Yeah, so I started to look at Clara Schumann's music, I think, a little bit more critically, just from like an accessibility standpoint. And like, what state are the editions in? What state are the recordings in? Like, what's going on? And I read Nancy Reich's biography. That was a really pivotal moment for me reading.
Yeah.
So then I started to wonder, okay, so if that's Clara Schumann, who's probably the best known woman composer there is, then what is going on with anybody else? Is there anybody else? And then it just started like this huge, I say this to you as someone who's done so much of this, this huge box of like, oh my goodness, there is so much. And like, it's amazing to explore it. So yeah, I think once I opened Pandora's box, I was ready to just dive in and like try to figure everything out. I was really doing it at the beginning from a very much a thinking about accessibility and the state of everything. Like, so are there pieces? Are they lost? Right? Because a lot are lost. Or have they been found and they're not being taught because they're not in published formats, or just not easily accessible online, that kind of a thing. So yeah.
That's a major area. I mean, that's the barricade.
I think so.
Or for us who have the desire and the motivation, and let's widen this canon. Oh, well, where's the score? Where's the score? I should blazon that on the wall, because it's like, I say it every day.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's you learn pretty quickly how much work needs to be done in that area when you start going through these things, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. So then you, I mean, among other things, but you have really got a nice focus on women in the classical era. I know, much other than that as well, but I'm so grateful that you've decided to focus there, because I really think composers in that particular era, they deserve such a huge spotlight on them compared to what has happened in the last however many decades or centuries. So what is it about that era and those composers that has drawn you to that area or era?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I initially thought I would do more in the Romantic era. was more drawn to that music generally. It was like what I normally played. I didn't really love playing classical era stuff, and I didn't have as much experience on forte piano and historical instruments as I felt like I would need to really delve into this. But I think it came down to access again, and just realizing how much hadn't been published and how much it hadn't been published, like wasn't available online, and maybe had been published, you know, and was available, but the editions were really expensive. Maybe had only been recorded on historical instruments, which is great that that's happening to some pieces, but I do want to hear them for, you know, teaching purposes. I am more often going to have access to a modern piano, so I think it's important to record on both. And so the other thing that I think, so that was the initial draw, was just knowing that there's a lot to be done there. And then after that, it was really interesting to me because I found that looking at this era like proves this huge point to naysayers and gatekeepers who deny like women's presence and existence and place in music composition. And basically, I think it does this because the quality of their music was celebrated and was being performed and was being sold and all of this during that era. And so, and I'd say there's actually a decline into like the Romantic era in that era of respect and of, you know, it's complicated. I could go on for a long time about this because it's tied to nobility classes and everything, but yeah, it's always been a question of what society told them they were allowed to do, and not a question of what the quality of their works were. That is like so important to me because you have, and it's great because I can point to quotes by Haydn and Mozart, and I can say, look, they said that these women were great. They said women composed great music. Salieri paid for the publishing of Auenbrugger's sonata. Obviously, he thought that was worthy of being published. And then Jane Savage's music, which is something I know you just put out a recording. I'm so glad to see that. And her music was sold in one of the leading publication houses in London. Same with Maria Hester Parks. So they were doing very well, and it was because that was the woman's domain, was piano and improvisation and composition, and that was tied to their marriageability and their ability to move around in society. And so it's we have these masterpieces, like pieces, you know, why don't we know about someone like Mariana Martinez, who composed these really phenomenal sonatas? And they've just been virtually erased. And I will say, I think part of it is, I have a kind of question in my mind about, did the women write down sort of a different version of their music than maybe male composers were writing at the time? I think sometimes you look at like pieces by Mariana Martinez, especially, and some others, and they seem like sketches. And of course, these women were so well versed in improvisation, and so I think one thing I've done with the HerClassical project, and I'm hoping to do more of, is give ideas of what some of those improvisations might be like in these pieces. So you can download the Auenbrugger sonata from the website, and I have like an Ossia line that is an optional improvisation on top. So it's an interesting thing to me. I think that's important for this music to study historical improvisation along with it. Yeah.
So do we have any kind of idea of like when did that erasing start, like the erasing of the classical era women? Like
right.
they were doing more or less okay, fine in their lifetimes, and then like did the 19th century composers know about them, or were they already gone? Do we know? Do we even have
That's something I'm trying to like learn more about. That's been a really important question to me. But I think it's also different by region. I've been focusing on two very different regions, which is like the London and then the Austro-German. And so in London, I would say I'm not exactly sure when that happened, but I know in Germany, Austria, it was like, I would say probably into like the 18th century. That's when women started to take on this like more recreative, like.
Wait, the 19th century or 18th century?
Sorry, 19th century. Thank you. I do that too often. Still. So yeah, there's an interesting by Rousseau that talks about how women are like meant to be basically recreative and not to be like the initial creator. And so that puts them in a good place for performing, but not in a good place for composition. Karen Pendel's like History of Women in Music book talks about this a bit. But and then of course we have like all these quotes by Clara Schumann that really confirm a lot of what she was feeling in terms of the pressure to not compose, and types of music that she was composing were very virtuosic and stage music early on, but then you see as she kind of had that freedom, she was able to compose in that very different style, which is much more mature and much more part of what was happening at the time in like high composition rate.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's just such a fascinating thing. And then, of course, then we have the 19th century composers. Well, some of them flourished in their day and then again erased. So, anyway, I'd love to have somebody. Can we just have the true history of music now, please? Just give me give me the true story, because I heard all the thing and having to dig so deep all the time. It's exhausting.
Right. Yeah, I think it's important though, like what you're doing with Piano Music She Wrote and like HerClassical and some of these other projects are like trying to really examine the history. And I do think that's important. I know some musicians I have talked to are more in the camp of like, let's move on and make things better in the future, right? But and really just champion this music now. And I totally feel that that's very, very important. But examining that history and understanding like that there have always been works there that should have been included and maybe even were celebrated in their day, but have been erased because of the identity of the composer. I think it's really important work to do.
Yeah, indeed. So yeah, as you said, and as I remember you told me when we spoke a few months ago, your focus has been mainly on the English and the German women. So let's just do a little bit of a list, because I mean, you're the one that introduced me to Jane Savage. Thanks to you, I thought, hey, I'm going to piece of hers, which I think we put out on Wednesday, yeah. And also earlier in the week, we had your lovely Four Hands piece of...
Oh, good. Yes.
Anyway, so we'll get to the German Austrians. But let's just start with English. Like, is there quite a list? Or how?
There is, yeah. I think there's quite a few, and just for like time's sake, I think what I'll do is I'll just kind of focus on the ones that are on the website right now.
And we should be clear that the project that you're talking about and the website is called HerClassical, which is the Instagram handle you're coming from.
Yeah.
HerClassical. So we'll talk more about the URL and whatnot later, but yes. So starting with English, who would you itemize and maybe describe a little for us?
For sure. Eva, I'm glad you're especially interested in British composers. So I would start with Jane Savage, like we were talking about. So Jane Savage, there's relatively little known about her, and I think that's one of the reasons that her music has been slow to be published, is like there's almost no information about her life other than some birth dates and like a couple of little details. But she was born in Kent, and she was very clearly a pedagogue, not because that's well documented as much as like you can see that from her music and from the fact that it was published and that she paid for the publication of that music. So, and that's a critical point, because a woman wouldn't just pay for the publication of their music unless they were planning on it being sold. And generally that meant that it was going to be sold to their students. But in Jane Savage's case, Longman Broderip was like one of the leading public publishing houses. So she was probably, I'm sure her music was being played much more than just by her students. Anyways, but so yeah, haven't been able to find many original sources other than just her editions. I'm hoping that'll change in the future, but so the only thing that I could tell you other than that is just that she was an organist at this place called the Asylum for or Refuge for Female Orphans.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so that's something that we know. Yeah, and she did was like the first anthem written by a woman composer for the Church of England. That's also a significant detail about her life.
Is that what is their anthology? Oh gosh, I can't even think of the name. Olivia Sparkle and Louise. Have you seen that? She have anthems published by Oxford, I think.
Louise Brion, maybe.
Yeah, sorry, names are just.
No, there's a lot. There are a lot of them. Yeah, and I don't know as much on that, but yeah. So, and then we have Maria Hester Park. She was also writing and selling in the same publishing house as Jane Savage. She was a performer and was like known in England for that. She was close to, she knew, I think, Haydn through her husband, Thomas Park. That's what I'm remembering. And other things about Maria Hester Park. Her music is really great. I love her sonatas. She's been like one of my favorites ones to play and just enjoy. Good question, Eva, on Maria Hester Park's. I wouldn't say they're virtuosic as much as like they're well-formed compositions, but they are not. They're a little bit more directed towards like amateurs who are doing quite well. So not necessarily all of them are like super difficult, but that's of the ones that I've studied. So I'm just speaking to those. So you have a little bit of variety with her music. So, and then Elisabetta di Gamberlini. So, and she's someone that I'm kind of starting to learn more about, but she definitely did a lot of like nice pedagogical pieces, and there's a lot of her music that I hope will be
a little earlier, more in a Baroque style.
Yeah, she's a little earlier, but I've kind of as far as like my specific dates that I focused on, I've kind of done anything about if they were alive in like 1750 on. So, but she's kind of considered like late Baroque, early classical is what I've seen. So I've included her, and I'm hoping eventually I'll be able to expand both directions anyways. But she was a great composer, soprano, pianist, conductor. So she was very well known. And Josepha, let's move to like Austrian now. So Josepha Barbara Arnhemmer, hopefully she'll be on the site soon. She's Austrian, primarily a pianist, and that shows in her music. Eva's point about virtuosity, here's where you want to look for like very virtuosic, like Arnhemmer's music. I think have you played some of them, Sandra, or was that?
Not to record, but Erica recorded the sixth variation of the Vogelfang.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Oh, Elizabeth Turner. I'll have to look into her. They're interesting. Yeah. I don't know if I've come across her as much, surprisingly, but
we have in the piano music she wrote anthology. I can't remember Yeah, one of the elementary level. We have a couple of her pieces. They're, yeah, great. We have the three Elizabeths,
Oh, nice.
more towards the Baroque, like a little bit earlier. So Jacques de la Gare, Turner,
Yes.
and Gamberlini. Yeah.
Cool. That's great. That's really great. Um, well, great. So yeah, back to with Arnhemmer. She is another one where there's not a lot of information about her, and some of it has been misrepresented throughout history. So they're like, I think it used to be thought that she was an only child, but she was actually one of 15, and just like all these interesting things. So she's one that we're still learning a lot more about, but she was a very good friend of Mozart's, and like a student of Mozart's. But
they played together, right?
Yeah, they did play together. And Mozart
Yeah.
wasn't exactly very kind to her, but or towards her. But yeah, so she was a great pianist. That was primarily what she did, but her compositions are really interesting and very virtuosic. Sophia Maria Westenholz, she's also on the site, and I love Westenholz's music. I think we talked about it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So grateful for the piece that you sent us for that we put on our channel last month. What is it? Is it considered a sonata?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just a sonata for four hands. Yeah, and it's a little bit more advanced. But one thing that I think is cool about her is she was a glass harmonica virtuosa, which is really random. And then even more significant is that she was a Kapellmeister, and which is like, if you know of anyone who was prior to her, you would be someone who might, but I don't know of anyone who was a woman who was before she was. So I think she might have been the first female Kapellmeister. And that's a very significant stamp. Of course, for a musician, it meant that you were really highly esteemed. And this was at the Mecklenburg-Schwerin court in Germany. And so this was like one of the leading courts at the time in Germany. So she came from a family of professional musicians. And of course, these ties are always important. And this time, especially, and a little later. So, but she was esteemed like as one of the leading musicians in Europe. She was like a great pianist and doing really, really well. And her compositions are really wonderful, very mature, interesting pieces. Sorry, this is getting long, but I have a couple more.
No, more the better.
Talk about.
That's what we're here for.
So Mariana Auenbrugger next. She's an Austrian keyboardist, and she died pretty young. That's well known about her because the composition that we have that's published by her, her sonata in E flat major, was published basically because she died at an untimely time, and Salieri wrote this beautiful ode that he attached to the sonata, and it's just basically all about how Mariana will be exalted. Yeah, so it's really a beautiful gesture that speaks very highly of the relationship that they had. And yeah, so
exalting. You better get busy exalting her.
I know.
Like, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you played?
Yes, I have. And that is the one, oh, sorry, my dog is kicking me. That is the one that I have published with an optional improvisation on top. So that one is on the website if anybody wants to take a look. And one thing that is not completely certain, but it's probable, is that she likely had a physical disability of some kind. And so exactly how that would have like influenced her as a composer, we're not really certain, but it could have been a contributor to her death early on. But she was described as having a crooked physique in various documents. So yeah. So, and then we have Mariana Martinez, who I'm so glad we just added, thanks to Patricia Garcia-Gill, who's joining the project now, very gratefully. There's a lot to do. And so just like tons to say on Mariana Martinez. She was very well connected and very highly esteemed. There's a great biography by Irving Goat on her. And she... What was that?
In English?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So I can't remember the full title, but yes, it should be not too hard to find. And then, but she wrote like really significant pieces, like motets and I think masses. Yes, masses, and just three piano sonatas. But they're all really great, really lovely works. And she was, the other thing I should mention with her is that she lived with Metastasio. Her family lived with Metastasio, and so he was a huge supporter of her career. And yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. As far as you also mentioned, like going into French composers, I haven't delved into that as much.
One thing about Mariana Martinez that I love is that she's exactly halfway between Haydn's birth and Mozart's birth. She's like 12 years before Mozart was born.
Oh, how interesting.
I love that.
Oh, and thank you. I'm sorry I have to go, but thank you so much for watching. Yeah, but that's very interesting. Yeah, and yeah, French composers I haven't delved as much into, but hopefully in the future, there's a bunch in this time period. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, there's plenty just even in those two cultures that you've done.
Yeah.
So, just was there any specific composer that you came upon in this journey that was just like huge exciting discovery, or is it just constantly like that every day?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I don't know. This one was a hard one. This is a hard one for me. Like I really get so excited about each of them as I learn more, and Mariana Martinez was really fun to learn more about, and I was initially like very drawn to her compositions, and so I was definitely excited to explore her. And one thing that was nice about her is that she was much more well documented, so I could actually formulate a full concept of who she was, like a much more than I can with many of these other women. But yeah, so that, and then I like I said, I was very drawn to Maria Hester Park's music and story, and very just interested in her. So,
right, yeah, that makes sense. So this project, HerClassical, did that originate as a pandemic time project? Like many of us, like piano music she wrote came out of this last 2 years. So did you have that as a response to that, or was that already in motion? And
yeah, good question. Yeah, it's kind of interesting because no, it didn't emerge as a pandemic project. It was something I would say that was very much interrupted by the pandemic. Yeah,
okay.
and so, I mean, it's a kind of, it's okay. I think it's all worked out just fine. But I initially started thinking about it and working on it mostly 2018, 2019. And that was when I really delved into the music really deeply and tried to track everything down. And I also submitted a bunch of grants and different things to fund the project. And but I was funding it in a way that when the pandemic hit, there was no way I could accomplish the project anymore because I needed to do things in person and things like that. And also just even recordings were complicated for a while, of course. And so all of that put a break on that for a bit. And I did, though, like in the pandemic, I focused a lot on a totally different project called the 5 p.m. series. And it was a virtual, sorry, dog, virtual concert series for musicians like across the nation and some international as well. And it was really great for me. That was priority in that time because I felt so strongly that musicians needed to have a platform, right? And that all these gigs and things were being canceled, and I didn't want people to just not have something to work towards. And the other goal was to help connect them with some financial aid from audiences when it was possible. So it was a great project. But then HerClassical, I've now started to come back to like over the past year or so. It's been more of a priority.
Right. Okay. And the 5 p.m. project, is that kind of finished? Or are you going to continue that now that real life might be possible?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's something we're trying to figure out. Like, I think this has now become, her classical has become more of a priority, and also just finishing my degree. So the 5
Oh,
p.m. has has been,
oh,
yeah, also that has been a little bit more on the back burner. But we really want to start it up again. I know there are a lot of musicians who want us to start it up again, and I would love to do it in some sort of live format. I just don't know if it's going to be possible. But that's, I mean, that would be really the goal if we could, I think.
right. Well, hopefully, hey, what about we could do a cross-border version? Do the
Right.
same concert here and there. We're only
Yeah.
like
Oh, I
30
think,
minutes.
yeah,
So,
there are so many possibilities, right? So it's very
so
exciting.
just need time and energy. Oh, and money.
Things
Yeah.
don't easily. Mm-mm.
Yeah. So outside of the her classical and the classical and Baroque composers that you've been exploring in your focus way, do you have a connection with any other historical composers, women? Obviously, that's our main focus here.
Yeah.
Nothing against.
Oh,
Hey,
sorry.
one of my favorites is his birthday is today, Bartok.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, yeah, any specific composer that you feel connected with, and maybe a specific piece of music?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the first one that comes to mind is the one I just performed, the Doreen Carwithen Piano Concerto. Yeah, and it's so great because like there's like everybody's she's becoming a little bit better known now, and it's her centenary. So there's like this big celebration in England happening this year, and a lot of her music is getting played. Very exciting, but I think she's really interesting, and her music is so appealing. It's so wonderful. So I guess I've been more connected to her music than maybe not quite so much like invested in her story. Although I do think there are some really interesting bits of her life, like um, definitely interesting to think about, like the fact that she probably composed. She did compose a lot of music that we just don't know about because she was doing it under ghost names and things like that for other composers in the film industry, especially in England. But yeah, so she just wrote like this amazing music with, it reminds me of Korngold a little bit because it has this movie kind of,
Yeah.
but then it's also kind of like Rachmaninoff or Chopin or something, and the figuration is like pretty advanced, and it's
She
very,
knows the instrument. She really knew how to use the instrument.
I
My,
absolutely agree. I think she wrote very well for the piano. Yeah.
I've been looking at her. Is it a sonata or sonatina?
Oh yes.
Oh, that movement is so glorious, and just like the that she starts with in that low, low part of the piano, and then ends there as well. It's just so satisfying,
Yep.
pianistic, and then of course musically, it's
Yeah.
magical.
Yeah, I'm excited. I haven't had the chance to explore her music as much. I've kind of glanced at it, and but I am excited to play more of it. It's really great. And that concert was really exciting for me because so many people in the audience, complete strangers who loved the piece and just spoke so highly of it. And I think that's like, again, I'm looking for those things to say to the naysayers and the gatekeepers. It's like people are accepting this music without the conception that musicians have of what the canon is, right? If you take
Right.
that away, people are saying that's a great piece of music, right? So
Which should be in the standard repertoire.
exactly.
What was it recorded? That
It
concert?
it wasn't really. It was recorded, but it's not a public release. So now I'm working towards hopefully getting it recorded for a public release. So
Oh,
that'll be down the road.
sweet.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
hopefully soon in the next month, a couple months.
Conductors, orchestras, get her to play Carwithin
Oh my gosh, please.
worldwide.
Yeah, I would love to play this piece more. It's so wonderful. It's so great. Yeah. Yeah, and I did mention Clara Schumann too. I'm very drawn to her life, and she's so fascinating. The amount that she accomplished, and how business savvy she was, and how she managed to balance, well, kind of balance family. I know that was kind of a little bit of, there was tension there for sure, but, and her just phenomenal career. Yeah.
There a kind of a neat connection between those two, in that their husbands were both,
Yeah, there's this,
and they did their husband's career so like almost extra,
right,
you know.
right. Interesting to find. I found this with a number of composers. I also connect like, um, I think it's Arnhemmer that I really connect to Clara Schumann in the style of writing. Like the early Clara Schumann really reminds me a lot of Arnhemmer, and they were doing similar things with their careers at a pretty similar time in a pretty similar place. So yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, the connection with like a husband who's a composer and helping them write and inspiring some of their music.
Kind of sacrificing their own thing for a while at least.
Carwithan 100% was, I mean, she was really gaga over William Alwyn. And so I think once she and him were together, it was his show for sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's a similar thing. And in both cases, he was significantly older than she. And yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's so true. That's a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah, that just came to me.
Yeah.
So, again, I just want to make sure people take a look for, in the piano music she wrote, Friends video project. Look for the video that we posted. What would that have been? March 21st, with Alissa. And say your friend's name.
Jen Huang also played. Yeah, she's a really pianist. Mm-hmm.
So is she part of HerClassical as well?
No, I have a couple of kind of guest performers who have been on with me on the duets, mm-hmm. But they're not, creating content or anything.
Okay. So HerClassical is mainly you, or? Yeah.
It's mainly me, but now Patricia Garcia Gill is going to more formally join the project, and she'll start doing some editing. She's already has some videos that are now on the HerClassical YouTube channel and the website. And we're hoping eventually that we'll be able to involve more people, because I mean, it's just this kind of collaboration and connection, like what we're doing right now is so powerful. And I see so many disparate projects happening, and I just think, oh man, this is really great, but it would be even better if we could connect all of these a little bit more and have this be more centralized. And that's a very difficult thing to actually do, but there are so many projects would work really better.
A topic for discussion. Let's have a chat about that.
Right.
Yeah, that's exciting. So the website exact address is
HerClassical.com. Mm-hmm. And there's a link there to subscribe to the email list, and then there's a YouTube channel that's dedicated to HerClassical as well, and then an Instagram account, which we're using a little bit right now, not too much.
HerClassical, really, really clear for people who haven't come across it yet. There are scores that you're bit by bit preparing for download.
Yes, so these scores can be downloaded from the website. Will link you to Just a Theory Press, who's done the publishing, and almost everything is available for free to download. That was one of my main goals, was to make this music accessible for free, because I want this to be as easy to implement as a Clementi sonatina is. Basically, that's the goal, right? So yeah, it's all there. Mm-hmm. And then there's, in addition to the in addition to the editions, there are also recordings of the pieces and historical introductions of the composers and the pieces sometimes, depending on the piece.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There are also some sort of portal for people to donate and support the project.
For asking, they're on the website. Mm-hmm. Yep. And also, when people do download a score, they can also choose to donate if they would like to donate to the project. Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay, you hear that, everyone? You can
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
That's so great. Well, I so appreciate this time we've had to chat today. It's gone really fast.
Yeah, it has.
I so appreciate it. And I just wanted to mention I've got a couple of really exciting things in the next 2 weeks. Next week, it's going to be all about Helen Hopkirk. And what a brilliant pianist and composer. And that'll be a chat with Hannah Roberts, who's also doing a DMA. And then the following week, I guess that makes it April 8th. Is that right? I think that's the week we're going to talk about Agatha Bakker Grøndahl, the Norwegian great, with Sarah Smith. And so really specific individual composers. And then I think I'm going to take a break from doing this every week. And it's going to transition into more of a podcast form. So all my beautiful guests that I've had so far hopefully can be a part of that.
That's exciting. That's very exciting.
Yeah. So I haven't really talked about it with Erica too much yet, but kind of on that. But I think it's something that needs to grow. These kind of, like you say, this collaboration and this sharing what we're doing, because there's so many now who are doing a piece of it, and yeah, to
right.
Sure we're all connecting, I think is super important. So again, thank you so much, Alissa, and I look forward to actually meeting for a coffee, hopefully soon.
Oh, yeah, I'm actually in Toronto possibly in May, so I'll let you know if I am. But
okay, if you're driving there, then I'm on the way.
Yep.
That's haha, we can yeah. So yeah, driving through, we can just have a coffee at least then. So I look forward to that. Thanks everyone for being along. Okay, take care.
Bye, have a good one.
You too.